Hello, welcome back. Welcome back. I'm John, old YouTuber and gamer. So it's Friday today. Have a good Friday. Have a good weekend. I just got 8 million views on my old YouTube channel Monko TV today. And I just buy a new external hard drive today from my MasterCard credits. But that was only 4,004 terabytes, or 4,000, not 5,000. So now one of my MasterCard is empty of money. But I'm getting my YouTube money in two weeks. I was eating 2 bags of chips yesterday and some candy, but so I have a little biscuit left. I will read about anti-tank warfare. And it's soon at 3 p.m. And this camcorder is full of power, so we can read this one and one longer maybe. But I'm a little bit tired today, so I think I will go early to bed and watch Star Trek and you. But let's eat some more biscuits. There's some salty biscuits. Tastes a little bit like salty and a little bit cheese. I got it cheap, like $1.5. This is a little. But now I'm finished today. I'm finished today with my Danish video. So, but I will stick to my read list, anti-tank warfare, and few days I will start to read about this 2020 main battle tanks, 30 generations, and after that I have to read about the Leopard 1 and 2 tanks. After this I have to read about the Russia-Ukrainian war and the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, because it's soon 1 year ago. It's soon the 24th June. So now I have ordered a new 4,000 gigabyte external hard drive. So now in the next week I will have more space to save a copy of this video. Yes, I need a minute to do myself ready in my bed, because I'm 100 kilos. Yes, and I did reboot my computer, so now the auto read should read again. No, works. I have to check the sound level. Speakers is 50. Activate voice. Read to end of documents.
Anti-tank warfare. A soldier preparing to fire the FGR-17 Viper, an American experimental one-man disposable anti-tank rocket. Anti-tank warfare originated from the need to develop technology and tactics to destroy tanks during World War I. Since the Triple Entente deployed the first tanks in 1916, the German Empire developed the first anti-tank weapons. 1. The first developed anti-tank weapon was a scaled-up bolt-action rifle, the Mauser 1918 Tijua, that fired a 13.2 mm cartridge with a solid bullet that could penetrate the thin armor of tanks of the time and destroy the engine or ricochet inside, killing occupants. 2. Because tanks represent an enemy's strong force projection on land, military strategists have incorporated anti-tank warfare into the doctrine of nearly every combat service since. The most predominant anti-tank weapons at the start of World War II in 1939 included the tank-mounted gun anti-tank guns and anti-tank grenades used by the infantry, and ground attack aircraft. Indian Army Tank Hunting Squad with anti-tank rifle and Molotov cocktails in North Africa. The 6th of October 1940 anti-tank warfare evolved rapidly during World War II, leading to the inclusion of infantry portable weapons such as the bazooka, anti-tank combat engineering, specialized anti-tank aircraft and self-propelled anti-tank guns, tank destroyers. Both the Soviet Red Army and the German Army developed methods of combating tank-led offensives, including deployment of static anti-tank weapons embedded in in-depth defensive positions, protected by anti-tank obstacles and minefields, and supported by mobile anti-tank reserves and by ground attack aircraft. A British 17-pounder anti-tank gun towed behind half-track in Italy, 1 September 1944. Through the Cold War, the United States, Soviet Union and other countries contemplated the possibility of nuclear warfare. While a previous technology had developed to protect the crews of armored vehicles from projectiles and from explosive damage, now the possibility of radiation arose. In the NATO countries, little if any development took place on defining a doctrine of how to use armed forces without the use of tactical nuclear weapons. In the Soviet sphere of influence, the legacy doctrine of operational maneuver was being theoretically examined to understand how a tank-led force could be used even with the threat of limited use of nuclear weapons on prospective European battlefields. The Warsaw Pact arrived at the solution of maneuver warfare while massively increasing the number of anti-tank weapons. To achieve this, Soviet military theorists such as Vasily Sokolovsky, 1897-1968, realized that anti-tank weapons had to assume an offensive role rather than the traditionally defensive role of the Great Patriotic War, 1941-1945, by becoming more mobile. This led to the development of improved guided anti-tank missiles, though similar design work was being performed in Western Europe and the United States. Both sides in the Cold War also recognized the utility of the light anti-tank weapon, and this led to further development of man-portable weapons used by the infantry squad, while heavier missiles were mounted on dedicated missile tank destroyers, including dedicated anti-tank helicopters, and even heavier guided anti-tank missiles launched from aircraft. Designers also developed new varieties of artillery munitions in the form of top attack shells, and shells that were used to saturate areas with anti-armor bomblets. Helicopter Scout be used as well to rapidly deliver scattered anti-tank mines. Since the end of the Cold War in 1992, the only major new threats to tanks and other armored vehicles have been remotely detonated improvised explosive devices, IEDs, used in asymmetric warfare and weapon systems like the RPG-29 and FGM-148 Javelin, which can defeat reactive armor or shell armor. Both those weapon systems use a tandem warhead where the first stage of the tandem warhead activates the reactive armor, and the second stage of the tandem warhead defeats the shell armor by means of a high explosive anti-tank, heat-shaped charge. During the Ukraine War, 2022, drones and loitering munitions have been used to destroy tanks. Tank threat. Anti-tank warfare evolved as a countermeasure to the threat of the tank's appearance on the battlefields off the Western Front of the First World War. The tank had been developed to negate the German system of trenches, and allow a return to maneuver against enemy's flanks and to attack the rear with cavalry. The use of the tank was mainly based on the assumption that, once they were able to eliminate the German trench lines with their machine gun and infantry support gun positions, the Allied infantry would follow and secure the breach, and the cavalry would exploit the breach in the trench lines by attacking into the depth of German-held territory, eventually capturing the field artillery positions and interdicting logistics and reservists being brought up from the rear areas. Naval crews initially used to operate the installed naval guns and machine guns were replaced with Army personnel who were more aware of the infantry tactics with which tanks were intended to cooperate. However, there was no means of communication between the tank's crew and the accompanying infantry, or between the tanks participating in combat. Radios were not yet portable or robust enough to be mounted in a tank, although Morse code transmitters were installed in some Mark IVs at Cambridge's messaging vehicles. 3. Attaching a field telephone to the rear would become a practice only during the next war. With greater use of tanks by both sides, it was realized that the accompanying infantry could be forced to ground by ambush fire, thus separating them from the tanks which would continue to advance, eventually finding themselves exposed to close assaults by German infantry and sappers. The early tanks were mechanically rudimentary. The 6 to 12 mm, 0.24 to 0.47 in, thick armor generally prevented penetration by small arms fire and shell fragments. However, even a near miss from field artillery or an impact from a mortar could easily disable or destroy the tank. If the fuel tank was ruptured, it could incinerate the tank's crew. A large caliber gun was recognized as a tactical necessity to take machine gun positions and defeat any infantry field pieces found in the trench lines which could easily disable tank track with the HE ammunition. This was achieved by mounting a 57mm QF 6-pounder Hotchkiss light naval gun in the hull barbets. Hull and track engineering was largely dictated by the terrain, the need to cross wide trenches, although the relationship between ground pressure and soil vehicle mechanics was not resolved until the Second World War. Turrets were later introduced on medium and light tanks to react to ambushes during the advanced. First World War. The tank, when it appeared on the Western Front in September 1916, was a surprise to German troops, but not the German General Staff. The French Army staff was highly critical of the British Army's early fielding of the Mark I vehicles in small numbers because the French trials showed the armoured vehicles to be highly unreliable. They judged that large numbers had to be employed to sustain an offensive despite losses to mechanical failure or vehicles being foundered in intractable no-man's land terrain. These losses, coupled with those from enemy artillery fire, later amounted to as high as 70% of the starters during some operations. Deploying small numbers of tanks would therefore cause the Allies to lose the element of surprise, allowing Germans to develop countermeasures. A British heavy tank of World War I anti-tank weapons. Because the German army was the only force in need of anti-tank weapons, they were first to develop a viable technology to combat armored vehicle. These technologies took three ammunition approaches: use of grenades by infantrymen, including the Jabot Ladung, bundled charge of several stick grenades bound together by pioneers, early attempts at the small caliber anti-tank rifles like the bolt-action 13mm Mauser 1918 Tijula, 3.7 Punta Crane Metal in Staroradolaft 1916 anti-tank gun on a light carriage which could destroy a tank. 4. Using large caliber armor-piercing ammunition issued in 1917 to special commands, and the existing 77mm field guns, such as the 7.7 cm FK-16, of the Infantry Division's Artillery Regiment were also eventually issued with special armor-piercing AP ammunition. A disabled Mark IV tank near Cambrai, 1917 World War I anti-tank tactics. With the appearance of Allied tanks, the German army were quick to introduce new anti-tank defense detachments within the pioneer battalions of the infantry divisions. These were initially issued 13mm caliber long-barrel rifles firing solid shot. However, these suffered from fouling after 2-3 rounds and had a recoil that was unsustainable by the mechanism or the rifleman. Stick grenades were used to destroy the tracks by individual pioneers. However, this required accompanying machine gunners to first separate the supporting Allied infantry line from the tanks, which proved difficult. Another tactic was to lure the tank beyond the German trench line, re-establishing it just as the Allied infantry approached. The tank would then be engaged by the divisional 7.7 cm guns brought forward, that would try to disable the tracks with ordinary He shells, and later AP ammunition. If the crews of the disabled tanks refused to surrender, they were engaged with flamethrowers, or a mortar would be fired on the stricken vehicle until a direct hit was achieved on the top surface, usually resulting in an internal fire. Finally, anti-tank obstacles were prepared on the likely approaches by deepening and widening existing ground cratering, the precursors of the anti-tank trench. Finally, in early 1917, the 3.7 cm tack from Rheinmetall was rushed to the front line, and proved effective in destroying the tanks despite limited elevation and traverse. Development between the world wars. Lack of consensus on the design and use of the tank after the First World War also influenced the development of its anti-tank countermeasures. However, because Germany was restricted by the Treaty of Versailles in its military capability, and there were no other challenges to France and Britain, very little development took place in anti-tank warfare until the 1930s. Czechoslovak anti-tank gun 37 VZ 37. The interwar period was dominated by the strategic thinking with fortified borders at its core. These included obstacles consisting of natural features such as ditches, streams and urban areas, or constructed obstacles such as anti-tank ditches, minefields, dragon's teeth, or log barriers. The pinnacle of this strategic thinking was considered to be the Maginot Line, which replaced infantry-filled trenches with artillery-filled bunkers, including casemates housing 37 or 47 mm anti-tank guns, and steel turrets armed with a pair of machine guns and a 25 mm anti-tank gun, although Germany was forbidden to produce tanks. The construction was partially based on Allied experience with the Hindenburg Line, which was breached with tank support during the battles of Cambrai and Saint-Quentin Canal, although German command was more impressed by the surprise achieved by the Canadian troops at the Battle of the Canal du Nord. This came to influence their planning in 1940. The Maginot Line defenses up to 25 kilometers, 16 mi, deep from the forward positions to the rear line were intended to prevent a surprise attack and delay any attack while the French army was mobilized. With the relative numerical inferiority between the France and Germany, it was a more effective use of manpower. Within the line, passive anti-tank obstacles were supported by anti-infantry and anti-tank bunkers. After Belgium declared neutrality in 1936, France began work on extending the line along the Belgian border. Improved artillery was seen as the quickest solution to anti-tank defense, and one of the earliest post-war anti-tank gun designs was the 25 mm Hotchkiss model from France. It was intended to replace an Atelier de Puteaux 37 mm weapon designed in 1916 to destroy machine gun positions. Rheinmetall commenced design of a 37 mm anti-tank gun in 1924, and the first guns were produced in 1928 as 3.7 cm Pak L/45-5, later adopted in Wehrmacht service as 3.7 cm Pak 36. It made an appearance during the Spanish Civil War, as did the Bofors 37 mm developed in Sweden, and used by many early Second World War combatants. The British Army accepted for service the 40 mm Ordnance QF 2-pounder, which was developed as a tank gun. The Soviet Red Army after the Russian Civil War also begun a search for an anti-tank gun with a French Hotchkiss 37 mm L.33 tank gun, but soon upgraded this to a higher velocity L.45 model 1935 while also making a licensed copy of the German 3.7 cm Pak 36. However, the Red Army was almost immediately taught a lesson about anti-tank warfare when a tank battalion sent to aid the Spanish Republicans in the Spanish Civil War was almost entirely destroyed in an engagement. At this time, the predominant ammunition used against tanks was the armor-piercing kinetic energy-sheltered defeated armor by direct pressure